So we've set up the basics of our magic effect, but it's time we actually tie this in with some anim montages and make sure it's not going to conflict with anything else that's going on in the game. So the first part of that is going to be the anim montage itself. I'm now going to go to Content Browser, and I'm going to right click, and I'm going to create a new anim montage based on, there's player shoot, which is the firing effect itself, at which point we also have magic switch. So I'm going to create it off of magic switch, and I'm just going to call this magic shoot montage. Okay. Now this initially shows her doing this. So if I hit play, she's going to do that. Now I'm going to set this to be upper body only. And if you look at it, so she goes down and she does this, at which point we want to set it up so that her hand does the firing animation next. So that's going to go magic, sorry, not magic, you can type in the word shoot, and you'll see we have player shoot. So I'm going to drop that in. And if I watch these two, she's now currently doing that. So she's jumping between them. But it's okay, we can fix that up. So what we're going to do to fix this up and hide that little jot there is, it's super obvious to us from here, but if you look at it from this distance, it's slightly less observable. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be playing a fire effect, which is something we haven't done yet. So as this goes off, I'm going to play an incredibly bright flash that is the fire effect itself, and that's going to hide this effect going off, as well as being the point where the projectile fires out from within us. So that means that we're going to need to add two new effects that we haven't created yet. One of those is going to be the initial burst coming from our hand, and the other one of those is going to be the charge up effect that we would play during this period. That warns players of what we're about to do. So with that in mind, let's quickly just put together some effects. I'm going to go back to my effects, and for the time being, I'm actually going to use my flight as a base, except I'm going to call this P_fire. So we want this to be a large impulse that comes out of our hand and is a one-time thing. So I'm going to get this, and I'm going to go spawn, and I'm going to set this to 0 on the rate, and once again add a burst list. Under required, I'm going to tell this I don't want it to loop, so it's a one-time thing. So that's good. The next thing I'm going to do is I want this to face down the x-axis so that when we're aligning it later, it's going to be a bit easier. So I'm actually going to turn the Z on both of these again, and this time I'm going to turn off the y-axis. Oh wait, sorry, I want to turn off the x-axis because I want it facing down it. There we go. So y is on, x is off. So we've got this now, and this is going to be our initial kind of flash. I'm also going to set the lifetime of these particles to be significantly shorter. Now it's working reasonably well. The final little touch I'll put on here is I'm actually going to create a new particle emitter that's going to spawn 0 as far as the rate's concerned. It's just going to have a burst of one particle, and that particle is actually going to be kind of a cheeky one. I'm going to get rid of this initial velocity, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to spawn a single particle that's very large. Okay. And it's going to be uniform, so it's going to be about 500. I could probably actually go 250. Yep, I'm going to set this to be a simple spot. I'm going to set the required to only loop one time. Lifetime is going to be very short, 0.2. So you can see it popping in. And then I'm also going to set this up to have a color over life. That's going to make it, actually I'm just going to steal the existing color over life that we have there. That way it's the same brightness. And the final part of this is going to be, so when we play it, that's going to do that right now. The final part of this is going to be going to size by life. And I'm going to set this up to scale along. So it's kind of starts big and then shrinks down. I'm actually going to curve that as well. And when that's coming out of my hand, it should look okay. It should hide that effect reasonably nicely. I think 250 may have been too big. I'm going to go down to 100. So it's just in the core of it. There's now just a guaranteed flash in the very center of it. If you ever want to view this in slow motion, you can always hit it to 1%. And I can see what's happening here as it explodes out. 1% may have been, let's go 10. So that core is definitely going to be bright enough as it's jerking back, basically. So we've gone to there, and that's all set up. We know this works. And so that's my fire effect. So in my magic montage, I'm now going to go to here. And I'm going to play the montage at this exact point. So scroll down, go notifies, I'm going to right click, add notify, add particle effects. And the particle effect I'm going to be adding is the P_fire. And it's going to ask me for a socket name. So I know I can actually just add it to the sword socket. So the moment that socket is actually rotated differently to how I thought it was, currently that's actually shooting out down that axis. So I want that facing, it looks like it needs to be rotated down. We can check really quickly here actually. So if I go show, we can set this up to show us the sockets, and I can see which way that's facing at the time. So it's actually facing the blue, which means the Z axis. So I'm going to set this up to be on the blue axis. So under sphere, I want it to be enabled. I don't want it on the Z. Go back to the montage, zoom out. Our overall effect might be pretty big as well, so I'm going to tinker with that. So the overall effect means that we're going to get the sphere, and I'm going to set its initial distribution to be between 10 and 40, which gets us that much tighter cell. And you can see now that when we play it, you don't notice the hands pop back. From up here as well, there's like a hot flash. But when that's combined with the actual explosion, I think it'll look quite nice. So that'll have the particle kind of shooting out from that point. Other thing I'm going to do is a very brief charge up effect. So I'm going to do that by, again, going to my flight component. And the reason I'm basing these all off of that initial one is it just makes it a lot easier to keep things consistent. So I'm just going to call it P-charge. And for this effect, it's going to have a duration of from this to this, so that's at 0.5 seconds. Yeah, so we're going to kill it at 0.5. Actually, I'm going to kill it even earlier than that. So I'm going to set the required duration. There it is, 0.25. So it's just going to be a quick effect, one time. So see how the rate plays until it's finished. So while we're charging up, we're going to have a rate that's doing that. But what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to set the point gravity to be offset on the Z-axis by about 250 units. So as I'm charging up my attack, that'll come out of my feet doing that, which I think looks quite nice. I could potentially make this go for a little bit longer, up to 0.5. 0.4 maybe. And I'm actually going to decrease the number of particles because I want it to look kind of cool but not be too excessive. Final thing that could look good here is adding an orbit to make them kind of swirl around their locations, which kind of creates a little bit more chaos. So I'm just going to have a quick look at how that goes. So the second we start to charge the effects, I'm going to play a notify. So add notify particle effects. I'm going to select it, and I'm going to set this to be charge. So that kind of works. I do need to end it quicker, so just in required, I'm going to set the duration to be 0.25. So it's, and I'm going to set the lifetime to be shorter than that. So it's kind of this effect, they all burst up. Because of that, actually, I could turn this up a bit and we'll get that initial cast. I'm also going to get the sphere and just pull that in a whole lot. So between 20 and 80 when we do it, 20 and 50 even. Yeah, that looks good. Great. Save. And the final thing that I'm going to do is when we actually shoot the projectile, it's at this point just here, right? So I'm going to add a notify. And before, you know how we had deal damage from sword? I'm now going to have fire magic ball. I'm going to drag this to the correct timing. I think about that's okay. Now, because we've done that, in the same way as before, where we set up the animation to deal damage to in the sword, I'm now going to open up my knight's animation blueprint. And within my animation blueprint, at the moment we have anim notify. This goes through the motions and then does try deal damage. And what we're going to do is we're going to fire magic ball is going to call a cast to the pawn owner, at which point that is then going to have a function that is going to be called launch projectile. So I'm going to quickly rework how our current magic setup is in the blueprint. So open up your character base. Now at the moment, try magic spawns the projectile directly. Now what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to make a new custom event that is called launch magic projectile. And the reason I'm doing it this way is that this is now going to play the montage that is going to be magic shoot montage. So that will play the montage, which will then fire this, because in this we're going to tell it to launch magic projectile. Now, at the moment, it's not compiling because I didn't compile the character first. It's a bit of a mismatch. It happens sometimes. If I compile it again, everything will be fine. So with that in mind, try magic will still get called with right click. That's going to play our montage. And montage is going to hit a point in it that says fire the bullet. And that's going to then come out here and spawn the projectile. Right click. See that? We've now got a great charge up effect, an impulse, and we have a good little animation to go with it. And as well as that, you can't actually spam it because the animation has to charge up. So as I do this, we're all set. Fantastic. So the last thing that I really need to do here is I'm going to actually add a little touch that on destroy, so on destroy in my projectile, I'm going to go to here. Just going to say on destroyed, spawn the emitter at location, do what you're doing, but as well as that, can you do one other thing? Can you damage from a radial position? So, oh, sorry, we want to cause radial damage. Apply radial damage. There it is. So we can actually tell this to have a radius around it. And the reason I'm doing this is that while we're kind of safe from being hit by our own projectiles right now, I do think that when they explode, it would be good if we kind of dealt some damage around them, with the location being the actor location. And if I look up here, I can see what we have before. We've got the instigator, controller, damage causer. So, oops, sorry, those two are switched around. That's that, and self is that. Great. So that will simply cast out, do some damage to anyone that's nearby whenever they explode as well. And we're all set on that front. Now, if we wanted to make it so that they could hit the player, all we would need to do is the first time they end overlap with the player, we now no longer ignore the player. So at the moment, I'm doing this check that was if it's the player. I could actually have a separate check that goes into that, because we have actor begin overlap, but we also have actor end overlap. And because they spawn overlapping us, when they end overlap, we could then no longer do this condition if we wanted to. Not going to bother because I like how it is in this end. I just want you to be aware that it is a setup. But otherwise, that's all we really needed to do to kind of finish off the magic feature so that it was a bit nicer. The final little touch that we might want to consider doing We could potentially charge up the projectile before throwing it, but I think this is a good enough example for the time being. So stick around and we'll get more enemies coming our way and we'll set the actual arena up.